If security is buried under the CIO, then availability always wins and security always comes in second. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole, where we spend some time each week talking to you about the role of a CISO. So whether you are a CISO, you want to be a CISO, or you're an executive that wants to bring in a CISO, we'll go in and cover the things you need to know to make sure you are successful. As always, if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, I'm on a mission to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. So I have Online Danger, which features my book, Online Danger, that helps parents, teachers, and non-technical folks be secure in cyberspace. So if you want to get your kids safe, your significant other, or non-technical folks, then Online Danger is definitely the way to go. If, however, you want to help your company or your organization, then you want to go to my company's website, secure-anchor.com, where we can tell you about our assessment and our vCISO services and even our vCISO training. If you'd like to take your career to the next level, you love what I'm covering on these Life of a CISO podcasts and on my show, and you want to get more detailed on-hands training with me, we definitely have some training opportunities for you. So definitely go to secure-anchor.com. What I'd like to do on this episode is really do a little more teaching. I feel like the last few episodes, I did more Q&A, covered foundational core areas, which I'm getting a lot of great feedback on. But I just sort of was getting a little itchy. I want to go back to doing some of my CISO training here. So what I wanted to cover here are the core things that you need to know about or to do to be or have a successful CISO in these crazy times. So whether you're an executive, a business, somebody who wants to understand how to create the Chief Information Security role in your company, or you are a CISO and you feel like it may not be working the best way possible, or you want to become a CISO and you want to understand what are those things you need to work on, that's what we're going to look at in this episode, those core focus areas that you need to be successful. And I sort of joke because on this one I say in strange times, because 2020 is definitely one of the craziest years I've ever seen. Right, I just saw a cartoon where somebody was going in the basement and they're carrying up boxes that say holiday ornaments. And somebody said, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Can't we just say it's the end of December and put an end to the madness that's 2020? And I sort of have to agree with that. But I'll tell you this, having worked in cybersecurity for over 30 years, having been a CISO for 20 years, we always live in crazy times, right? It's never going to be a time where things are easy, because that's what makes it awesome. If you're looking for a job that's simple, easy, always the same, and predictable, yeah, you're on the wrong podcast, right? You need to go somewhere else, right? But if you're looking for one of the most exciting jobs where you have to relearn your job every 3 to 4 months and always stay ahead and asked to be a superhero, then yeah, you're on the right podcast. I was joking, instead of Life of a CISO, I actually wanted to call this podcast Life of a Superhero, right? Because that's what Chief Information Security Officers are. So whether you are a CISO or want to be a CISO, I tip my hat, Godspeed, and let's keep working together to do the best we possibly can. So the first thing that's critical in order to have a successful security program at any organization is you must have somebody in charge. You must have a Chief Information Security Officer. I believe most companies are there, but I still find some organizations that bury security under IT. Security is not a subset of IT. It's not a component of IT. It is a separate, independent element. You must have a Chief Information Technology Officer that's focused on the uptime, and you must have a Chief Information Security Officer that's focused on the overall security. So you have a CIO, Chief Information Officer, and a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. Those two are equal. Now, in many organizations, they might report directly to the CEO, which is okay. In some organizations, there might be a sublayer. So in really big organizations, your CIO might report to your Chief Operating Officer, your COO. And then you'll typically have your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, either report to the Chief Financial Officer or your Chief Legal Officer or legal counsel, head counsel for your organization. And I sort of like that because to me, you want to have them equal. What I don't like to see in an organization where you have a CIO reporting directly to the CEO, so they're at the top level, and then your CISO reports to a CFO that then reports up, because that means they're not equal. And that's going to create problems and challenges. So you want to have those two roles equal, because let's face it, sometimes availability, which the CIO focuses on, and security, which the CISO focuses on, are sometimes at odds. And sometimes it's the CEO that needs to make that decision, and they need to make sure they're getting accurate data and information from both sources so they can make the correct decision. Now, to be honest with you, I honestly believe what's going to happen by the year 2025, so over the next 5 years, is you're actually going to have a Chief Information Security Officer that reports directly to the board of directors and the CEO. And let's face it, what are the core areas of security? Remember CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. So you have confidentiality, prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized disclosure of information. You have integrity, prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized alteration of information. And you have availability, prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized destruction of information. What is the CIO? The CIO is really availability. And if you're really facing it, the CIO has a metric of 5 nines, 99.999% uptime availability. They're an availability officer. So really, they're one of the 3 tenets of security. So to me, what I believe will happen, and organizations are starting to recognize this, is your Chief Information Security Officer is responsible for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You're going to have a Chief Confidentiality Officer, a Chief Integrity Officer, and a Chief Availability Officer, which is known as the CIO, which you have today. So if actually we're going to see a switch where instead of the security officer reporting to the CIO, you're actually going to see the CIO reporting to the CISO. And once again, with these types of things, when it comes to technology, I'll sometimes get the timing off. So it might be 3 years or 7 years, but usually I'm pretty accurate, having worked in this space for 30 years and understand businesses of how they operate and how they run. So that's the first piece that's needed. If you're going to be a CISO in an organization, or you're setting up a security office in your organization, that CISO must be equal or over the CIO. And yes, in my personal opinion, that is an area you want to fight for. If they're going in and saying, yes, you'll be the CISO or you'll be the security officer, but you're going to report to the CIO and you're going to be buried under IT, I personally would not take that position. Because the only reason to take that position is if you want to get the title for your resume, so you can say you've been a CISO, but you're going to be frustrated. And once again, it's nothing against CIOs, but CIO and security are sometimes adverse. There are many cases today where, for example, patching a system is critical, but it could impact the uptime availability. So a CIO that's focused on uptime availability is going to delay patching, and a security officer is going to push patching forward, even though there could be an availability impact. That is a balance that somebody else other than the CIO needs to make. If security is buried under the CIO, then availability always wins and security always comes in second. And I get some CIOs that get mad at me going, Eric, That's not fair. You're saying that we would put harm. No. I'm not criticizing you. If you're a CIO, well, let me put it this way. If I was a CIO at a company and my job and my bonus was based on delivering 5 nines, if I deliver 99.999% uptime availability, I'm successful, I keep my job, and I get my bonus. If I don't deliver on that, I don't. Guess what? I'm going to make decisions that are going to be positive to the uptime availability. I'm not going to do things that put availability at risk. That's not a negative of the CIO. It's how the position was defined, and it's the sole reason and purpose why security can't be under IT, because it's an inherent conflict of interest situation. So if you're going to become a CISO or become a CISO at an organization and they're not going to make you equal to the CIO, I would think long and hard of whether you want to take that job, because you're not going to be able to be successful if the primary driver for decisions is going to solely be uptime, which is what CIOs are focused on. So that's the first thing. The first thing to be a successful CISO is you must be equal to the CIO. You must have a seat at the table. The second thing that you must have to be a successful CISO is you must have a single metric. You must have one metric of success. To me, that is why Chief Information Officers, CIOs, are so successful, is because they have a single metric. In almost all organizations today, CIOs are measured by uptime availability. It's often called the 5 nines. So if you're a CIO and you deliver 99.999% uptime availability, you're going to be successful. You're going to get bonused, and if you don't, you'll probably lose your job. Now, yes, is running an IT department a lot more complicated? Absolutely. But from the executive standpoint, it's not. It's a single metric. You're either meeting it or you're not. That is the key to success. So in order to be a successful CISO, you need to define a new 5 nines of security. You need to define a new metric that is reasonable and effective, because the current metric that's used today is setting you up for failure. And a lot of people go, there is no metric today. Oh, there absolutely is. Do you know what the current metric today for a CISO is? If you don't have a breach, you keep your job. That's the metric. So if you're coming up for your yearly review and your company did not have any major breaches, you keep your job. If you've had major breaches, you lose your job. Now, how do I know that? Look at the facts. In almost every situation, when a breach happens, what is one of the first things that happens? Whoever is responsible for security gets fired. We almost see that every single time. That is the playbook that companies follow. Now, the irony is, even if they made everyone aware of the exposure, even if somebody else was responsible and ignored the CISO, it doesn't matter. If a cybersecurity breach occurs, you fire the Chief Information Security Officer. That's in the playbook, right? And if you go back and look at all the major breaches, that is exactly what happens. Now, here's the problem. We all know in cybersecurity that if you have any functionality, which every organization does, 100% security doesn't exist. There is no way an organization can be 100% secure if you have functionality. Because remember the analysis, 100% security equals 0 functionality. As soon as you add any functionality, you are decreasing your security. So if you have any functionality, servers, clients, endpoints, which every organization has, email, web servers, then you are definitely below 100% security, which means every single organization is going to have a breach. It's a guarantee. It is going to happen. Now, the goal of security is not to prevent all attacks. It's to minimize the damage and exposure of critical data. But the problem is, if the playbook says, if you have a breach, fire the CISO, and we know for a fact you're going to have a breach, you've basically been diagnosed with a terminal condition. You're going to get fired. The question is it in a month, 6 months, 9 months, or a year? But it's going to happen. That's not a good position to be in. To be in a position where your metric for success is guaranteed failure is not where you want to be. So we need to change that metric. That is an awful, awful metric. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. One of the things that I have been obsessed with in my career, being one of the first CISOs and having done this for over 20 years, is coming up with that security metric, coming up with the 5 nines of security. Now, what I will tell you is this. The metric that I have currently come up with, I don't like. I don't like it, but I use it, and I use it with all my clients because I currently don't have any better metric. There isn't any other metric out there that is better or more suitable, so I use it. And the reason I give that caveat is this. When I tell a lot of people, a lot of security folks, a lot of CISOs, the metric, the 5 nines of security, their response is always, I don't like it, or I don't know if we're going to use it, or this, or this, or this. And then I always go back to them. Well, what do you have that's better? Well, nothing. Well, then use mine until you do, right? And that's the point. The metric I'm going to give you is not perfect, but it's better than anything else out there. So until you find anything better, utilize the metric. So without further ado, because I know you're all on the edge of your seat, you're like, tell us the metric. Right, I will tell you this. The metric that we use for our clients right now is attempted attacks. We go in and we use the amount of attempted attacks that an organization has. Now, first I'll tell you what I like about it, and I'll tell you what I don't like. What I like about this metric, it's a positive metric. It tells you what a good job you're doing. We stopped 20,000 attacks this week. That's good. That means you're doing a really good job. It's a positive metric. One of the metrics that many companies use, which I do not like, is vulnerability scanning data. And the reason I don't like that, it's a negative metric. You're telling the company what you're not doing, right? A vulnerability means something you didn't fix. So if you go to your executives and you say, oh, this quarter, we had 300 vulnerabilities. We had 300 things we didn't fix. And then next quarter, we have 400 vulnerabilities. The next quarter, you're basically saying, look at how much we suck, right? Look at what we're not doing, right? Negative metrics are not a good thing. You want a positive metric. The next thing I like about it is most executives are completely and totally unaware of how good a job you're doing. I go in and I spend a lot of time with CEOs. I spend a lot of time doing executive roundtables and asking them questions. And I recently met with 7 CEOs and I asked them a simple question. How many attempted attacks do you think your organization has a week? So how many attacks do you believe that your security team is properly defending, stopping, and blocking on a weekly basis? And whenever I ask this question, I always get numbers 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That they're always single digit or low double digit numbers. Now, in one of these meetings, there was a CEO that is very, very analytical. And I saw him when I asked number of attempts. He looked down and he was like making some notes and some numbers, and very, very affirmatively, he said, it has to be less than 14. And I said, well, how'd you come up with that? He said, well, I had to think what is significant. And if there were more than 2 attacks a day, I would consider that significant, and I would expect my security team to tell me. Because my security team hasn't told me, that means it has to be 2 or less, And because there's 7 days in a week times 2, that's why I said it has to be 14 or less. And when he said that, it was sort of like, I just sat there. Because think about that. He's absolutely right. If your organization has more than 2 attempted attacks a day, that is significant. And you should be telling your executives, yet many security teams do not do that. And when I looked at him, I said, sir, I work for your company. I've seen the data. What would you say if I told you that your company has between 50 to 60 attempted attacks every single day and 200 to 300 a week? And he just sort of sat there and looked at me and said, we have a major problem with communication if that is true. And I could not have said it better myself. That's the problem today. We as security people do not think 200 to 300 attempted attacks a day is significant. We don't think 2,000 or 3,000 a month is significant. However, to an executive, it's extremely, extremely significant. So what I like about this metric, it raises awareness. Now check this out. Check out how cool this is. If your executive thinks that there's 2 or 3 attempted attacks a month and you have a breach, they're going to go, there's only a few. They should be able to defend against it. They're going to fire you. And that's the current logic that's being used of why when there's a breach, most CISOs are let go. However, if you're now telling your executives every week that there's 300 to 400 attempted attacks, now, if in 7 or 8 months there's a breach, what are most executives going to do? They're going to say, you know something? I wish it didn't happen, but if we're having 300 to 400 a week, I guess one getting through every 7 or 8 months is acceptable. So that's not a bad thing. And they're going to go in and now you keep your job because you had a proper metric in place. Now, just finishing up the metric, what I don't like about attempted attacks, it's not something you directly control, right? Whether you have 200 attacks or 800 attacks could be based on external factors, based on foreign adversaries, organized crime, could be whether ransomware attacks are on the rise and other factors. So it's not something you directly control, which I don't like, right? On the other hand, it's still, to me, better than anything else I can come up with. So if you have a better metric than attempted attacks, please post it as a comment to this video, and I'll definitely take a look at it, and we'll discuss it in future episodes of Life of a CISO. But please, please don't tell me I don't like it, but I don't know anything better, because I know that already. We're in agreement. I don't like it either, right? But I don't have anything better, so we use it until we come up with something better. So that is sort of 2 core things you need to make sure you do as a successful CISO is make sure you have a position that has the executive's attention and equal to the CIO. You can't be buried under IT. Second, you must have a security metric that measures your success. And like I said, when I come up with something better, I'll let you know. But right now, attempted attacks is one of those. The next one, just tying this all together, is you need to have security KPIs, key performance indicators, for all of the business units. Because here's the problem today. The problem today is business units have all of the authority, but none of the responsibility. And I'll give you an example. One of our clients had a department that was making a ton of money, but their employees would always click on attachments and they would always get infected with malicious code. And this CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, went to this vice president and said, listen, your team is not following the security policy. They're not following the rules. They're turning off the security programs. This is unacceptable. And the VP basically said, pound sand. And they were buried under IT in this case, and they went to the CIO and they went to the COO and they said, listen, we have a policy, we have protocols, we have technology in place, and this department is completely and totally ignoring it. Everyone in the company knew, but this vice president was making tons of money at a high profit margin, so everybody ignored it. Everybody knew that this was a huge risk. Then 4 months ago, one of those employees of that department clicked on an attachment and got ransomware that took down the entire company. And what do you think the executives did? They fired the CISO. And the CISO said, but I told you this was a problem. I told you this was an issue, and everyone ignored me. And their response was, listen, don't blame other people. Security is your responsibility. You should have fixed it. So this is a broken paradigm. There is no way you can be successful if you have all of the responsibility but none of the authority. If you have a vice president that has authority that can ignore you and you get punished for their sins, that is really good for them, and that's really bad for you. Now, in future episodes, I'll talk about the graded scorecard. That's a 20-minute discussion, so I can't get into it now. But just as we start to wrap up this episode, I just want to urge you, put in security KPIs. So just like business units, they have KPIs on performance. They have KPIs on employee professionalism, on HR. You need to put a security KPI in place for every business unit. Now, I will tell you this. When you start doing it, the business units will fight you because the vice presidents like the current system. They have all of the authority and you have all the responsibility. I do things wrong and you get punished. I ignore the security policy and you get fired. They like that. But guess who doesn't like that? The CEO, because he knows that that's not helping to protect the organization. So this is why a CISO needs to be on the board, because you need to tell the CEO, listen, this current method isn't working. Your VPs are thrilled, but it's hurting the business. We need to put in, just like there's profitability in HR, key performance indicators or KPIs, we need to put in security KPIs. And the best and easiest one are phishing campaigns. If your business unit has an overall success of 97%, which means only 3% of employees will click on a phishing campaign once every quarter or whatever the number is, then you get your bonus. If it drops below 97%, then you lose money. Now, I will tell you, when you first do this, like I said, the VPs will hate you. But once they realize how straightforward it is and the process in place, they're going to love you, because now it's easy money. You mean to tell me that as long as my employees don't click on inappropriate links and we report any links we're supposed to, I get $20,000 every year? Oh, that's awesome, right? So once it's in place, they like it, but they're going to fight you initially. But that has to be done, because if you don't have security KPIs where you are holding the business units responsible with their authority, you're never going to fix this problem. Because many of the attacks today with ransomware we see on the rise, data exfiltration and others are all being delivered via email with attachments or embedded links. And until you can make the business unit responsible for security and start enforcing and pushing it out to all their employees, we're never going to win this game called cybersecurity. So as we wrap up this episode, the three things we talked about to be a successful CISO is the CISO must be equal to the CIO and report to the executives. You must have a metric, the 5 nines of security, which I went in and defined as attempted attacks. That helps raise the visibility. And you must put security KPIs in place. If you do those things, you will not only be a successful CISO, you will stay at the company for as long as you want, and you will have a very safe and secure organization. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Life of a CISO, and thank you for joining me on my mission to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family.